Hello, everyone. Welcome to this multi-part series where we're going to go over designing a flag, from there turning it into a solid model, and then lastly adding cam and possibly manufacturing this flag. That said, let's go ahead and start with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to first save our file. As you can see, I saved mine as American flag. I do want to make sure my timeline is also on down at the bottom. This makes my life much easier if we ever have to go back and make changes. If yours is not on, you're going to go ahead and right click, go down to capture design history. As you could say, mine says do not because we've already started. So that being said, is I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch and I'm going to pick my plane. I don't concern myself what plane I'm in. It really doesn't bother me, especially later on. Don't get too caught up in this. But let's start by actually creating a very rough rectangular shape of our flag. So as you can see here, I went ahead and just drew two simple rectangles. I used R, the hotkey. From there, I'm going to use D for dimension, or you could click it up here on the timeline. And I'm going to go ahead and add my dimension to my side. So according to the drawing that I have in front of me here, guys, this is a cheat sheet. There is a ratio to everything when it comes to the actual flag. And that being said, is that's where I'm pulling my dimensions from initially to get everything scaled down to the right settings. Later on, we're going to add parameters to fix this and make it much more controllable where you could just type in one dimension and everything changes. So let's go ahead and add a few more dimensions here. So I know in the length of this guy, we're going to go ahead and say that is 0.76. And then my overall height here for my union is going to be 0.5385. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and I'm actually going to hit escape and drag these dimensions horizontally and vertically to get them out of this center section. Again, this is just going to make it a little cleaner and a little nicer for me to work with. So from here, we're going to go ahead and add our stripes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to create a line and draw a bunch of lines here because it's going to get pretty ugly pretty quick. However, what I am going to do is I'm going to go down to create. And what we're going to do is we're going to click rectangular pattern. So I'm going to use this bottom edge. I'm then going to click this arrow. It's a little hidden back here, but if you guys didn't know, you could actually move this window out of your way. But I'm going to click this and I'm going to drag it up. And the reason why I like to drag it up is because one, it shows me right here, the dimension is changing and the direction is changing. So I need to know that this is negative, but it also shows me that we're in this lower section of a rectangle pattern, not this upper. Again, we're making a straight line pattern with the rectangle pattern tool, which again, can be confusing, but simply by dragging that arrow, it's helped put me where I need to be. So based on a spacing here, and so the cool thing is we know this spacing based on dimension 1 right here. So this is my dimension. Again, that was the first thing I dimensioned. So we're going to say based on a negative D1, as you're seeing now, the quantity of 3, we have 1, 2, 3 stacked out appropriately. So if I change this to 13, you now see we've patterned 13 lines based on a total distance of dimension 1. So you may not be using D1. You may have dimensioned over here for the length of the actual flag in D1, and then this is D2. One neat trick, if you don't know what it is, you could go ahead and hit OK, as you're seeing here. And if I go over to this dimension and I highlight it, you're going to see it says D1. If I go down here, we're going to get D2. If I can hold still long enough, my arm is kind of in a weird spot. Again, each one of these dimensions now has its own D value to reference. Now, because we closed out that actual pattern, you can see I have a constraint here for a pattern, but we also forgot the world of actually creating enough stripes, which is giving us this weird offset. So again, as I'm going to go in, double click that pattern. We still want to use that negative D1 dimension, but I want to increase this from 13 to 14. And what you're going to notice happen now is all of our pattern is going to line up accordingly. So as you can see now, as soon as I hit OK, we're square to the bottom of our union. And again, it's a little hard because we still have all these lines in here. We're going to trim those. But if we count here, we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 stripes as needed for our flag. So now let's go ahead and actually trim the length of these lines that we don't need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to trim, and I'm going to walk through here, and I'm going to click each one of these lines. And as you're going to see, as I trim these, it actually broke my constraint down here for the pattern. So this is something to keep in mind that is later on when we start to move things around, it could break what we're trying to do. So the reason why I did the pattern here is I wanted to show you guys a different way to draw something. Now I could have drew all these lines in. That's perfectly okay by any means. But now that I have the lines, let's add our dimensions in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dimension the first line off the bottom. And what that dimension is going to be is dimension 1 divided by 13. And what that's going to give me is that fixed dimension. It should be 0.76. We're getting 0.77, but that's more than okay. So again, as if we go up the line now, and I reference that back, and that's how I'm going through this, is I'm going to each one, and I'm clicking the one before it. You could reference each and every one of these to the very first dimension if you wanted. However, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that in my case, D9 is always going to be that first dimension to control everything. So again, we're going to go ahead and place this again, and this will take me a minute to go through all of these. So I went ahead and misclicked there, and we added a long dimension again. I could go ahead and highlight that and delete it. Again, we're going to go here to here, place that dimension, and going through each and every one of these. So in the case of this, I actually made a mistake. And if we zoom in here, you guys can see this a little better. Some of these dimensions are calling out an FX007. That being said, is I want to make sure that they all are saying FX so that when it comes time to change anything, it's automatically updating those values automatically. So again, is we're going to go through here. It's going to take me just a little bit longer to lock in all of these dimensions. And then we'll be able to actually test this. So again, I'm not too concerned which one I click each time, as long as it is one of the dimensions over here on the side to make my life nice and easy. So as you can see, we almost finished up here. And as you're seeing, I'm getting into this create driven dimension. And the reason for that is what's happening is that last top rectangular line was set with 1 inch. It's not actually set now based on our spacing. But I still like to have it there because it's going to tell me if we're right or wrong. So let's test this real quick. So I'm going to adjust a few more things real quick. And what I'm going to adjust is this dimension right here is actually going to be dimension 1 times 1.9. And the reason for that is because if this dimension goes to 2 and I hit enter, notice how everything kind of blows up and expands, right? So we're now 2 by 3.8. If I go to 3, we're now 3 by 5.7 when it comes to that flag size. But as you're seeing, my lines are automatically spacing for me. Don't pay too much attention to the fact that they're not fully extended. We can fix that. Again, that takes nothing more than a drag and a snap to a location. And now you can see that constraint, again, comes in nice and easily. So if we went back to a 2 here and I hit enter, my lines are now shrinking and growing based on that dimensional callout. So again, is if I take D1 and we times that by 0.76, again, we have that ability to control anything and everything. So actually, I'm going to go 0.76, and we're going to delete the inch here real quick, times D1. And we do need to put inch in here in some way, shape, or form, or else it's going to come out in millimeters. But as you can see, again, is every time this goes up, we are taking our number, and we're doing the math based on that number. So in this case, we're actually throwing that off. So it should be, or no, we're correct. So we are coming out 2 times 0.75 gives us roughly 1.5. Again, we could do that here. We're going to take this guy times D1. Again, automatically updating the size of that rectangle as we need to reflect the proper values and everything. So again, as I'm going to go back to 1, as you're going to notice, we shrink back down to the perfect size. If I go back to 2, again, everything expands out. We actually have an extra line floating in here that we don't need. So let's delete that. And now let's drag these all over and get them constrained to the side. Another way, if you wanted to, instead of clicking and dragging these, is you could actually go to the top and you could say coincidence between this point and this line. This is another way to do this. This is what we're actually building when we create those constraints automatically by dragging our line over. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up the rest of this here real quick. And as you can see, we now have all except this guy right here. And there we go. So now we have created a parameter controlled sketch that actually controls the size of our flag and our stripes. Now, the neat thing about this is we need this to actually work again with our actual stars. But before I do so, I want you guys to take a look at something. So notice how these aren't actually constrained. And the reason how I can tell is by clicking, dragging, and dropping them, the dot is disappearing. So this is something to pay attention to again, is you want to make sure that everything and anything is getting fully constrained the way it should, so that there is no issues later when we use the sketch for the machining portion. So now that we've laid out all of our actual stripes, we have our 13 stripes spaced evenly. We're now controlling everything just by the height of our flag. So let's go in and let's set all of our stars. So I'm going to zoom in here to make life easy. And because our star pattern is technically 2 rectangles, there's a little trick that we could do. But a few of the things we need to do is, one, the size of our actual star is based on a diameter circle, again, with that math. So let's go ahead and set this back to 1. And the reason I'm setting that back to 1 is so that we don't askew what's on my piece of paper and what we have drawn here. But let's go ahead and set this out. So we do know that all of our stars are evenly spaced vertically, both rows of them. And we also know that they're evenly spaced horizontal. However, our pattern, as you'll see here in a minute, is kind of like in every other kind of pattern. So let's start by dropping a circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a construction circle. And what that circle is going to allow me to do is to create my star here in a moment. So we're going to go ahead and dimension this. And the dimension of that circle is going to be 0.0616. And now that we have the dimension of that, we could actually set the reference point. So based on G in my drawing, 063. So we are 063 from this end, 0.063. And then we are also dimensioned from the top. Again, I used D, the hotkey D for dimension. We're actually also 054 from the top. So I set the reference point to that first star. Now, foreshadowing ahead and knowing what's going to come from this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to create another circle here. And I'm going to say this circle is equal to this one. Again, this just is going to make my life much easier because we're going to pattern this based on 2 separate rectangles. Again, I know this vertical dimension is going to be that 054. And I know this horizontal dimension here is going to be that 063. So I can just repeat. So now let's draw our star, right? So again, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I am actually going to start with a construction line. So I still have my construction line turned on. And I'm going to create a vertical line on both of these. And to get this out of the way, let's drag this down so you could actually see it a little better. To get this dimension moved over here and this guy that way. So now to draw our actual star, we're going to use a line tool. I'm going to turn off construction. And I'm very roughly going to draw the shape of the star that I want. Now, I want to be careful here because I don't want in any way to cause any kind of crazy constraining here. So the key element is that regardless of how out of whack your actual star is, we can fix it. And if you notice here, if I start to click and drag on any of these straight lines, the actual star starts to move around with the exception of the very tippy top point. And I want that because I want that tip top point to stay confined. So now again, as if we use a constraint, we say equal, and we're going to equal these lines kind of all to the same size. And what you're going to eventually get is a perfect star that's not movable. Now, if you do over constrain this, as you can see, if I click 2, I get a warning. That's understandable. But the idea is that each star should have at least one equal sign on it to control each and every one of them. So again, if we know at the end of the day, the size of this actual circle is controlled by dimension 1 right here, we could plug that information in once again. So if I take that number times dimension 1, so we're going to go ahead and hit times D1, we can now control the size of that circle. Again, I'm going to do this a few more times here real quick. So we know this dimension times D1. And then we also know down here, this guy is going to be that dimension times D1. And again, I don't have to put that times D1 on any of these fixed sizes because that's all automatic. And to test this, once again, we're going to go ahead and zoom out. And let's say we go to a 3 size flag. As you see, that swelled way up. And the diameter of my circle right here, that 185, is no longer the original dimension of 0616, right? So let's repeat that one more time because we have to put a second star in place. So we're going to go again. We're going to create our line tool. I'm going to start at the tippy top, and I am going to draw a very, very generic star once again. And I am just left clicking everything through and then back to the top. So again, this is where we can make everything equals. And as soon as we get all of these equal to one another, you're going to notice your screen, it may turn black. Mine turns white because of my background. However, it is now fully constrained, and we have two perfectly same size stars here based off everything that we're doing. So once again, we could go ahead and set our star pattern. So based on our star pattern, we do have to come up with 50 stars. However, we have to do them in a certain arrangement, but this is all going to be based off that spacing. So let's go ahead and create our pattern. So again, we're going to go in and we're going to say rectangular pattern. And I'm going to pick the things that I want to pattern. So I'm going to pick these 5 lines for my star. And from there, I'm going to pick my direction. So I'm actually dragging that down initially. And now we could either go by extent or spacing. I'm going to go spacing this time. And as you see, it's a positive integer because we're going down. Now, based off this dimension right here, I don't remember what it is, and that's actually not the dimension. So we're going to drag some things around here real quick. So let's hit OK, because we can always edit our pattern. So if we drag a few dimensions here, there, and everywhere, I'm going to put my mouse here. So we're working with dimension 25. Let's go back to our pattern. So again, as I'm going to zoom in here on that first star, here's my pattern. We're actually going to set this to D25. And as you're going to notice, we have 3 of them. And if you hit OK, you're going to notice they're going to jump up. Now, we want to kind of go every other one. That's the idea of our pattern. So again, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to double click my pattern. And I'm going to say D25 times 2. And as you're going to notice, we're now going down based on double the dimension, giving us that every other offset that the American flag has. So from here, let's go ahead and now go to the right before we add all of our stars in, right? So again, I'm going to go up here to the top. We're working with dimension 24. I'm going to go ahead and click on that star. And again, you have the ability to set your horizontal now. So again, we are going to set this to 3. And then I'm going to go ahead and say D24. And that's going to be times 2. Again, we want that every other pattern as you're seeing. And now I can increase the number to fill out my rectangle. Again, based on the size and the spacing, the number of stars never actually change on the flag. The spacing is now controlled by the height of our flag. So everything here is automatically spaced exactly as it needs to be based on our American flag. So we can go ahead and hit OK. So now from here, if you've ever made a mistake, which is completely doable, we all make mistakes, we could always go back and edit. So one cool thing is based on that pattern command, we pick the objects that we wanted to pattern. Now, if I was to trim these, because I want the outside of the star, I don't want that inside hexagonal shape. If I trimmed that inside hexagonal shape here, and I go back, you're going to notice that my pattern is all screwed up, and I may have to repattern or undo what I did. So this is not a big deal to be able to fix what you've already done. In my case, I'm actually going to leave that center cross section there. I kind of like it based on design. And again, we could actually do what's called a break as well if you wanted to. So one neat thing is you can break these edges as well. But as you can see, based on patterning out our shapes and creating everything and anything that we need, we got our first rows of stars all spaced. So again, as I'm going to repeat this one more time, we're going to go in and I'm going to say another rectangle pattern. We're going to pick our object. Actually, this time, let's do this. Let's back this up. The second go around, we are actually going to trim the inside of the star. And again, because we want everything to be equal so that it holds that actual star shape, I can go in and say, each one of these sides is equal to one another. And upon them all being equal, it's going to actually trigger this to create the shape and the profile and set that star and hold that star shaping. So another trick that you could do here is we can go ahead and say parallel also. We want these 2 lines parallel, these 2 lines parallel, so forth and so on. Again, the idea is we want to get this as constrained as possible so that nothing is moving or changing based on what we're doing. And as you guys are seeing, we're starting to get very much into the weeds of too many dimensions and too many constraints inside this shape. However, as you're seeing is the same idea applies as I just want to carry out what we have here, and I want that to reference or actually pattern out. So again, another way we could do this is based on a couple of construction lines, kind of fix what we've done, right? So as you're seeing me do here is I'm going through with construction lines, and I'm adding back that hexagonal shape in the middle. And what I can do with that hexagonal shape is, again, based on making all sides equal, this can actually fix and repair that shape again. So let's pattern this out. So I'm going to go ahead and say rectangular pattern. I'm going to pick the actual pieces that I want to pattern. And as you remember, in the case of what I'm doing, we actually have dimension D4 going this, or D24 this way. And with, oh, I typed that into the wrong area. We're going to go ahead and start with 3 of those, and we're going to put D24 here. And then going down, I know that's D25. And again, we want to do everything times 2. So I'm actually going to fix it on this side here so you guys can see this. You can enter these dimensions in either place. Helps if I hold the shift key as well. Again, we're going to go times 2 times 2. And as you're seeing, my pattern is starting to break out the way it should. We now need to go to a quantity of 5 across and a quantity of 4 down, and followed up with the OK button. So again, very chaotic in here. It's looking a little crazy. We have dimensions all over the place. But if I go ahead and type in here, instead of 3, we go back to 1, and I hit enter. My pattern of my stars should all follow suit. And as you see, it is maintaining anything and everything about that relationship and how that's going to work. So that kind of concludes how to sketch this flag and parameter control it so that you guys can actually get the very first step, which is create the design that we're later going to project down on our part or use to split up our body for the different pieces to manufacture. If you guys like content like this, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and stick around for part 2.